7:02.
The Naked Scientist.
20 minutes to 3 o'clock time for the Naked Scientist. Dr. Chris Smith is back and we have missed him so much. Happy Monday, Doctor. How are you
Happy
doing?
Monday. I'm very good. How are you?
I am doing swellingly well. I think I just made that up. Swell is the word I think I was looking for. And we're so excited to have you back, having missed you for 2 weeks. The questions are already coming in thick and fast. One person says, can you ask the Naked Scientist, is it dangerous to have floaters in my eye? I've had it for 5 years. What can I use for it? What are floaters, Doctor?
When you look at a bright sky, for example, you sometimes see what appear to be little bubbles passing your field of view, and they drift around aimlessly, and if you stare fixedly at one point, they drop out of view, and then when you move your eye around, then they're back, annoyingly. You also see this when you look down a microscope, for example. They'll swim into your field of view, and when I was really little, I remember being about 7 or 8 years old, and my parents gave me a microscope. They obviously thought this guy needs to be a scientist. And I remember looking down the microscope and I thought I'd discovered something. There were things moving down my microscope. And I realised, because I said to someone, can't you see these bubble things moving backwards and forwards? And they said, no, Chris, that's your eyes. Those are in your eyes. They're little foreign bodies. They are bits of blood vessels. They can be bits of cells. They can be debris from the material inside your eyeball. Your eyeball isn't empty, it's not gas-filled, it's filled with a jelly-like substance called the vitreous humour. And this can accumulate materials, bits of dead cells, other debris, things left over as embryological remnants. And because these are mobile in there, they can occasionally cross the field of view of the light rays that are going onto the retina, and they produce a scatter pattern. And that's why you see these they look like blobs or rings, because as the light refracts around them, you get a series of rings that are darker and brighter. So that's what they tend to look round. But they are completely normal. Everyone has them to some extent. Where you may need to pay attention and be alarmed is if they're a new thing, you've got lots of them, and they're associated with, for instance, prior symptoms of a flashing light appearing at your vision, or a curtain type effect coming down, or a sort of black rain phenomenon. Those can be a sign of something more sinister, such as a hemorrhage into your retina, or a detachment of your retina, or the vitreous pulling away from the retina. These are common things. They need fixing. You need to see an ophthalmologist if you get any of those new symptoms. But the odd floater, they're completely normal. Everyone has them to some extent. Unless they're getting worse or you've got lots of them all of a sudden, you can ignore them and just learn some tricks to keep them out of your central field of view. And don't, if you're teaching a kid to use a microscope for the first time, let them feel that they've discovered a new form of life, like I did, because they haven't.
All right. Thank you so much for that question. Let's go to Lionel in Joburg. Hi, Lionel. Go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. I have a small lamp. It's got a 2-pin plug. When I hold that 2-pin plug between my lips, the lamp lights up. So anybody who wants to relate to me, I'll tell them you're going to have an electrifying experience.
Wow. Is the lamp mains powered, or is the lamp an LED lamp that you would connect to a battery or something?
It's an LED.
Yeah. Okay, that explains it then, Lionel. Because if it's mains powered, then obviously it's an incandescent bulb probably, and going to require a lot of energy to make it glow. LEDs are extremely efficient, and you don't need to put much oomph into them in order to get them glowing. I suspect, but I don't know for sure, that what's happening when you put your connectors in your mouth is that you are basically creating a miniature battery in your mouth. If you have two dissimilar metals in contact with each other through an electrolyte, you can get an electrochemical difference between those metals, which will mean that one dissolves, the other one builds up a layer, and electrons go around a circuit. That's how a battery works. And I suspect that the connectors probably are slightly different metals between the connector and the wire, and when you are putting them in your mouth, the saliva in your mouth, which is a salty conductive solution, is behaving like an electrolyte, so you're producing a very small voltage, and the LEDs, which don't need much potential to make them light up, I suspect that is why it's lighting up.
Thank you so much, Lionel, for your call. And we go to the lines. Sammy in Centurion. Go ahead, Sammy.
Hello,
why is it that nations in the global north are more industrious and more innovative than the ones in the global south?
Doctor, I think the question would be, are nations in the global north more innovative? Because there are conversations around the fact that credit was taken where it was not due. What are your thoughts on that? If nations in the north are more innovative than those in the south, does it have to do with the weather?
Hi, Sammy. Good question. Why is it that more things seem to have stemmed from the north than the south? Well, part of it is people. There are more people in the north. There are more people in close contact to each other in the north, and that almost certainly would have had a benefit. There are also better weather conditions under certain circumstances across a lot of the northern hemisphere, so probably people would have had a better living environment. That's not exclusively the case, but there would have been environments that would have been propitious for the discoveries and for that kind of thing to happen. If you want people to live in large threshold populations, which is where you end up with modern societies, where you have farmers farming, those farms serve cities and enable towns and cities because you can have a population. If you have a population, then you can educate that population. If you educate the population, then a proportion of them are going to become amazing engineers and people with great insights and that kind of thing. So yes, I think to a certain extent geography must play a role, but the fact there were lots of people there would also have helped. And once you've got momentum behind things, it's almost like a snowball thing. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Once you've got things beginning to happen, then activity begets activity. Because once you've got Isaac Newton coming up with clever maths, you can do even more things because the clever maths enables you to do more. So once things began to move, they began to move very, very quickly. So it was really where that threshold point was first reached. And I think probably it goes back to, as I've said, the ability to have farms with farmers feeding cities, which then had a threshold population that then could invest in technologies. And I think that probably had a lot to do with it.
All right. Thank you so much for that one. We've got John in Centurion. Hi, John.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks, and you?
Good. My question is regarding phobias. This is quite an interesting one. So for the last 20 years, I've been avoiding highways because it feels like I'm going to crash. So, and even if as a passenger, I can't go more than 80 k's an hour. And even on aeroplanes, trains, even the Goud train that I got, I get panic attacks. I've seen a psychologist. Where does this come from? Do you think I must do CBT? I've had anxiety pills. It just doesn't go away. I've been living with this for 20 years.
Is it about the speed, John, or is it about the openness?
I think it's agoraphobia, maybe the openness. I'm not quite sure what it is, but just something triggers me.
Interesting, doctor.
Get anxiety attacks.
Oh, sorry to hear that. One thing I can say is, as I'm trying to teach my daughter to drive at the moment, I wish she had an anxiety about going under 80 k's, because at the moment it's like, there's a roundabout coming up. Can we please slow down? But
slow down.
Yeah, slow down. Take it easy. The bottom line is that phobias are one of those things that we often can't explain why we feel what we feel, but we know it's very real and it's very scary. And sometimes they are irrational. Phobias are irrational fears of things that probably will never happen. They're almost certainly rooted in genuine, reasonable fears that then become somewhat out of control. It's perfectly reasonable to be frightened of going too fast for fear of losing control and having an accident. It's perfectly reasonable to be frightened of spiders because there might be some venomous ones that might bite you. But the ability to rationalise and say when it's appropriate to be fearful and take action versus when it's appropriate because it's safe, that perspective appears to be upset in a phobia. Now, there are some people who certainly have some kind of switch thrown in their brain that means it's harder for them to disabuse themselves of the notion than just snapping out of it. And it may well be that there is an inherent tendency in some people towards becoming unreasonably frightened of certain things. But the other question that's being asked is, because we just don't know why this happens, it's part of life's rich tapestry, what can we do about it? And there is evidence that, in fact, teaching people through conditioning that they can manage their fear is the successful way to surmount this. In the same way that when people have panic attacks, they often panic because they're feeling panicky. And the panicky feelings make people feel more panicky, And that makes more symptoms appear, which make people then panic more because they think, I'm going to die, I'm having a heart attack, I can't catch my breath, I'm asphyxiating, I'm going to faint. And all these things make the fear worse, and then you focus on those, and that makes you feel even more fearful. When you point this out to people, they then say, oh, so all the symptoms I'm feeling are coming from myself, and I'm focusing on my own symptoms, and they're making me have worse symptoms. So if I just talk to myself and say, well, actually, I know why this is happening, I know what's happening, and in a moment I'm going to feel more panicky because there's more adrenaline coming out, and this is going to make me feel worse, you can undermine the basis of the anxiety, and it goes away. So what psychologists tend to do is a sort of graded exposure, where you say to people, we're going to expose you a little bit to the thing that you find frightening or that induces these kind of dread feelings. And we're not going to do it very much, but a little bit. So you're going to feel a bit uncomfortable. But all you have to remember is that you're feeling uncomfortable because you're making yourself feel uncomfortable. And as you do that, just ask yourself, well, why is that happening? And what actually would go wrong if I just said to myself, this is because adrenaline's coming out, it's going around my bloodstream, it's making my heart beat faster. And you can talk to yourself, telling yourself, if I do this more, I'm going to feel a bit worse. But the only reason I'm going to feel a bit worse, nothing's really changed, is just because there's more of that adrenaline around. And if you keep doing this and keep exposing yourself, and it's like walking out a little bit further and a little bit further every time, and then you retreat to safety, because you're managing the symptoms, and you learn to manage the symptoms, eventually they stop having that power over you, and then you feel much better. And then in some people, they never come back. And in other people, they remain at a very low level that you can completely control. So they never completely go away, but they don't bother you. And then you've got control. And it's all about that sense of control. And once you get that sense of control over your symptoms, you won't look back. So try some graded or aversion therapy for this, because it really can work wonders for certain people.
Thank you so much, John. Very quickly, Nomusa in Johannesburg, you want to ask about the leap?
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, Lebohile and the scientists. I just want to know this one day that makes up a leap year. How does it come about?
Well, in order to understand a leap year, we first have to understand a year. What is a year? Well, a year is the time it takes our Earth to go round the solar system on one big lap around the sun once. In other words, to start at one place in space, go in a big circle around the sun, and come back to where it started. Now that takes about 365 days. Now you'll notice I said about, because it doesn't take precisely 365 days. It actually takes 365 and a quarter days. But we call it 365 days. Now if we ignored that, we'd keep on adding days to our calendar every 4 years, and eventually, after enough years, we'd end up with summer happening during the winter because we'd be moving the months along. So what we do is we wait a convenient period of time, because it's a quarter of a day. It makes sense to wait for 4 years, because 4 times a quarter is 1, and after 4 years, we've got 4 quarters of a day. So then we have 366 days in that year. That's our leap year. We add a day in, and that then resets the calendar by adding it to February. We could add it anywhere, really, but we add it to February because someone Roman decided that February should be the lucky month. It was a magic month, and so that's when we should have the leap day. But we add our leap day in there, and that keeps us on track so our calendar doesn't wander off and end up with summer occurring when we normally call winter. That's the reason.
Thank you so much, Nomusa, for your question. Dr. Chris Smith, back together next week.
See you next time.